안녕하세요. 오늘도 운동하기 전에 치후 360 로봇 청소기에 대한 간략한 리뷰를 하고 나서 운동을 하도록 하겠습니다. 워낙에 운동을 너무 안 하고 이상하게 언박싱만 하는 거 아니냐라는 말이 많아서 지금 너무 졸립니다. 근데 일단은 로봇 청소기를 간략하게 말하면 강추합니다. 정말 사세요. 일단 사서 그러니까 뭐 고민을 하고 계시면은 그냥 무조건 사는 거를 추천드립니다. 너무 편해요. 좋고, 제가 두 번째 리뷰를 말했을 때 이거 좀 아닌 것 같다. 나는 로봇 청소기를 별로 신뢰하지 않는데 근데 이틀 써봤는데 좋아요. 너무 좋습니다. 일단 왜 좋은지 말씀드리면, 제가 처음에 할 때 분리수거함이랑 쓰레기 봉투를 얘가 막 빨아들였어요. 전체 매핑을 하는데, 그래서 막 치워가지고 막 신발장 앞에다가 다 빼놓고 막 했었는데, 일단 매핑이 끝나면은 맵에서 제가 청소를 하지 말아야 될 구역을 설정을 할 수가 있어요. 제가 그거를 뭐 보여드릴 수는 없는데, 지금 핸드폰으로 촬영을 하고 있는 중이라서 정말 쉽게, 정말 신기하게도 저희 집 구조가 다 나옵니다. 얘가 알아서 저희 집 구조를 다 매핑을 해요. 그래서 제가 네모칸이 뜨는데 그 네모칸을 그냥 마음대로 조절할 수도 있어서, 그것이 정말 신기한 건, 그 네모칸을 조절할 때 네모칸의 크기에 대한 그 치수가 미터로 환산이 돼서 어느 정도의 그 공간인지가 파악이 너무 쉬워요. 네, 정말 편리합니다. 정말 하는 것도 쉽고, 써보면 알아요. 되게 쉬워요. 그리고 두 번째는, 확실히 제가 이제 이거를 청소를 시켜놓고 집에 돌아왔는데 바닥이 되게 깨끗합니다. 원래는 깨끗했지만 먼지나 그런 게 없는 것 같아요. 느낌상인가? 제가 지금 이틀 청소했는데 이 먼지통을 아직 안 빼봤어요. 이틀 청소한 거에 대한 먼지통이 얼마나 빠지는지를 볼 거고요. 그리고 얘를 사용하려고 그러면은 바닥에 옷이랑 특히 양말, 그 다음에 이런 게 있으면 안 돼요. 저는 원래 혼자 살기 때문에 이렇게 집에 들어오면은 일단 일단 옷을 다 벗어요. 벗고 이렇게 또 수건도 쓰고 나면은 바로 세탁기에 안 넣고 그냥 바닥에다 던져 놓거든요. 일정 양이 쌓이면 이제 그거를 이제 주섬주섬 주워서 이제 세탁기에 넣고 하는데, 보통 혼자 사시는 분들은 다 이러지 않을까라는 생각을 하긴 하는데, 어쨌든 이제 그런 거를 이제 바닥을 어느 정도 그때그때 정리를 하니까 확실히 집안이 좀 더 깔끔해진 느낌? 로봇 청소기 때문에 좀 더 정리를 한다는 그런 느낌이 있어요. 그렇습니다. 일단은 강추합니다. 아니다. 먼지통이 얼마나 쌓이는지 한번 보여드릴게요. 먼지통은 간단한, 저번에 보여드렸죠. 이렇게 그냥 이렇게 뒤에 커버를 열면은 이렇게 뒤에 먼지통이 있어요. 먼지통을 빼면 됩니다.
먼지통이 빠져 있습니다.
멘트가 나오네요. 먼지통이 빠져있다고. 그치. 먼지통이 없는데 작동을 하면은 말이 되나, 그죠? 이틀을 썼는데 제가 한번 열어볼게요. 야, 이렇게 먼지가 한 이 정도, 한 10분의 1도 안 찼습니다. 엄청 작은 양이죠. 근데 저는 이거를 매일은 안 쓸 것 같아요. 굳이 매일 쓸 필요는 없고, 한 이틀에 한 번, 혼자 사니까 뭐 집에 애완견이나 반려견이나 뭐 이렇게 고양이를 키우시는 분들은 매일매일 써야겠지만, 저 같은 경우는 매일은 안 써도 되고 한 이틀에 한 번만 청소를 해도 되지 않을까 생각이 듭니다. 먼지통은 왜 보여줄지? 먼지통은 다음에 비우도록 하겠습니다.
먼지통이 장착되었습니다.
먼지통을 껴도 먼지통을 꼈다고 멘트가 나오네요. 이상 로봇 청소기 일단 강추합니다. 그리고 이거를 선물해주신 우리 열혈 시청자분 감사합니다. 잘 쓰겠습니다. 일단은 치우고 바로 운동을 하겠습니다. 너무 졸린데 4분.
Likely, conservatives know the public actually wants the welfare state and that a modern country could not function today under some libertarian fantasy experiment. In any case, the result is that conservative leaders have left their base permanently aggrieved, feeling betrayed, and thus distrustful of any new campaign promises. In recent years, as the fever grew, conservative voters became desperate for someone who had not played this game of bait and switch with them. Into this rage against elites walked Donald Trump, who easily toppled the old conservative establishment and rode the frustration with elites all the way to the White House.
You're not elite, you're elite.
George Will has written a fascinating book, but at its heart is the same saga of a lost American utopia that has crippled modern conservatism and damaged American politics. Will describes himself as an amiable, low-voltage atheist. Well, then he surely knows that there never really was a Garden of Eden. For more, go to cnn.com/read and read my Washington Post column. And let's get started. I'll be back in a few moments, but first I want to go to CNN's Jim Sciutto, who is going to bring us all the important goings-on at the G7 meeting in Biarritz. Jim?
Thank you, Fareed. I'm Jim Sciutto in Washington. And we have this breaking news from the G7 summit in Biarritz, France. Of course, this is the annual gathering of the presidents and prime ministers of the world's largest advanced economies. This morning, we have news that a plane carrying the Iranian foreign minister, Javad Zarif, has landed in Biarritz. U.S. officials are saying not with the intention to meet with U.S. officials on the ground there. We have our Pamela Brown, senior White House correspondent, traveling with the president. Pamela, do we know what the function of this visit is then by the Iranian foreign minister? And is there the possibility of talks with U.S. officials sometime in the future?
Well, that's certainly what the U.S. wants. In fact, Steve Mnuchin just spoke with reporters and said the U.S. is open to speaking with the Iranians without any preconditions. But the Iranians have been closing the door to that. And in this statement from the spokesman for the foreign ministry, it says that there will be no meetings or negotiations with the Americans during this trip. And in terms of the purpose, Jim, the spokesman also says the Iranian foreign minister will continue consultations and discussions on recent initiatives between the presidents of Iran and France. Now, the president was asked about this, President Trump was asked, and he simply said no comment in response to this unexpected arrival of the Iranian foreign minister. Now, Steve Mnuchin went a little bit further and did add that again, the U.S. is open to a dialogue with the Iranians, but the Iranians have made their stance clear that they are not open to dialogue with the United States. Of course, here at the G7, Iran is a central focus. Many of the countries here want to keep nuclear weapons out of the hands of Iran, but how to go about doing so, they differ. Of course, President Trump, as you know, Jim, pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal. And just in recent months, tensions have been rising between the U.S. and Iran. As you'll recall, just recently, Iranians shot down a U.S. drone, and the U.S. was prepared to send limited missile strikes over. And so this is certainly an interesting dynamic that the Iranian foreign minister, Mohammad Zarif, has arrived here in France for the G7, an unexpected arrival, and again, no comment from President Trump on this.
Pamela Brown, thank you, on the ground in France. We're joined now by David Sanger, a CNN contributor, national security correspondent for the New York Times, and also author of The Perfect Weapon, War, Sabotage, and Fear in the Cyber Age. David, you make the point that this is President Trump's third G7, and in that time, he has not moved America's closest allies one iota closer to his position, which is to leave the Iran nuclear deal. Do we know the function of this visit by the Iranian foreign minister, and is it possible that maybe the Iranians and the Americans surprised by meeting face-to-face on the ground there?
Well, I imagine it's possible, but it's Mr. Zarif himself, Jim, who was sanctioned by the Trump administration just a few weeks ago, and basically they went after whatever assets he had in the United States. He said he didn't have any, and essentially barred him from travel to the U.S. except perhaps his visits to the UN. At the same time, he's the only one they can really talk to. there's not going to be a meeting, at least any time that we can imagine, between the president and the supreme leader in Iran, who usually does not meet American or even many of his European counterparts. He has met Prime Minister Abe of Japan. So Zarif, who is the foreign minister, is probably the best conduit, and of course was the conduit for the negotiations, first in secret, then in public with the Obama administration. Now, an interesting question here is the Europeans who are there have been pretty unified, Jim, in putting together a set of efforts to counter the American sanctions, basically to undercut the U.S. sanctions on Iran because they say they want to preserve the Iran deal. President Trump has been completely on the other side of that, and there's no indication right now that either side is giving on that issue.
Okay, let's talk about the China trade war. Of course, the president, some 48 hours ago, roiled international markets by announcing new sanctions, retaliatory on China following China's imposition of tariffs on the U.S. But the president back and forth just in the last 24 hours as to whether he was having second thoughts on the imposition of those new tariffs, or the White House seeming to indicate he was having second thoughts that he did not go tough enough with those tariffs. Do we have any sense of what the actual White House position is on this?
I think the White House is struggling to come up with a position on this. I mean, it was just on Friday, Jim, that you saw the president described Xi Jinping, the president of China, as an enemy. It was in the same paragraph in which he used that phrase for Jay Powell, the head of the Federal Reserve. Today, he said our relationship with China is actually quite good. Now, people are accustomed to the fact that the president has swerved many ways, but in the China negotiations, I think the bigger fear is it's not clear to anybody what our objectives are. Is it simply the removal of trade barriers in China? Is it the theft of American technology? Is it the requirement that American companies turn over their technology if they want to manufacture in China? Is it Huawei, the Chinese telecom manufacturer who President Trump has banned from the U.S. and is trying to get the Europeans to do the same? So we don't understand the priorities here in any way, and I think that that's what's got the markets roiled, that and the president's claim on Friday, which he does appear to be backing away from, that American companies should get out of China. In fact, he seemed to suggest he could order that. He did order it by tweet. It's not at all clear he has that authority. So I think what's roiling the markets and the allies here is the fact that there's so much inconsistency in the American position, and because the Chinese have clearly not folded as President Trump believed that they would.
They have not, and in fact, there are some reads from inside China that China senses weakness, political weakness in this president, and willing to apply greater pressure going forward. David Sanger, great to have your analysis there as the G7 talks continue in Biarritz, France. We're going to continue to follow all the headlines coming from France as the U.S. meets with its closest allies there. Coming up next, Fareed will be back, and we will pivot from the south of France to Asia. How is this part of the world faring in the era of Trump? Please stay with GPS.
The Dangote Group stands at the forefront of African enterprise. Since 1978, we've touched the lives of millions of people by meeting their basic needs. Our belief in the promise of Africa has taken us into 14 African countries, with substantial investments that will propel the continent towards greater prosperity, promising jobs, improved standards of living, and economic growth. Dangote, for an empowered Africa.
This is a Dan Bao, a single-stringed guitar from Vietnam. No one knows for sure when these instruments were invented, but craftsmen like Do Ye Don make them by hand, just as his father did when his music workshop first opened in 1953. It's not easy to make them. First, he selects the wood, The guitar is then shaved and shaped.
Hiện nay thì những cái nhà máy lớn
Now many big factories, for example in China, can produce musical instruments like guitars by machine that are cheaper than ours. However, the Vietnamese can compete with them because mass production doesn't create as beautiful a sound. In Vietnam, we produce guitars by hand and use all natural materials. It may not be as cheap, but the sound is outstanding.
On the next Africa Looks East, I'm in South Africa.
And I'm in Japan to show you why business leaders here are investing in Africa.
From driving new opportunities forward,
The transfer of skills from Japanese to Kenyan, the importance of that is immense.
to digging into the future and connecting the continent to the world. These are the ways Japan is partnering with Africa.
Africa Looks East, Saturday on CNN. Celebrate the racing season in style with CNN.
This month's winning post, An Elegant Life, samples the delights of South Korea and explores the nation's increasing hunger for horse racing.
Winning Post, An Elegant Life, Thursday on CNN in association with Logi.
An unprecedented Democratic presidential town hall event. Climate crisis. Biden, Warren, Sanders, Harris, Buttigieg, Klobuchar, Booker, O'Rourke, Yang, Castro. 10 candidates, 10 town halls, all on one night.
I think it's expertise and passion for the story.
If you've been there, you know what's going on.
CNN Today with Michael Holmes and Amara Walker, weekdays.
For somebody to tell you their story, it's something I take really seriously. It's not something you can just parachute in and ask somebody to open their heart to you. To peel away the layers, to get to the heart of the person who you're telling a story about.
France will never give up against the terrorists.
And delve beneath the surface of what's happening. You can hear their story. You're going to do their story justice. You have to show yourself to them.
So right now they're hovering pretty low over this area that's extensively flooded.
CNN's the right place to tell their story.
I want to turn now to how a key part of the world is faring in the Trump era. Asia is the globe's most populous continent by far, and as Kishore Mabawani points out, the world will gain 1 billion new middle-class consumers this decade in Asia alone. So how is the so-called Asian century going? Has it been derailed or strengthened by President Trump? Joining me now from Singapore is Parag Khanna. Khanna is a CNN global contributor and the author of the new book, The Future is Asian. Parag, what does the tension between the United States and China over trade suggest to you in a kind of broader sense?
Well, Asians are going to put their own interests first. They see that the U.S. and China are on their way to decoupling. As you know, the U.S. is now trading more with Canada and Mexico than it is with China. So Asians are looking to potentially ratify this year the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, the RCEP. That's 16 countries. It will constitute one of the largest free trade areas in the world. And it's going to take some of that pressure off the Asian countries and increase or expand their exports to each other. That's basically where this trade war is taking Asia, towards greater regionalism, more integration, or at least more complementarities with each other, and less dependence on the U.S.
One also sees Europe getting more active in Asia. What do you make of that? A number of free trade deals that the Europeans are signing with Asian countries.
It's a great point, Fried. I'm glad you brought it up, because actually it's important to also make clear that this pattern that you're describing began before the trade war broke out. The European Union countries trade more with China and with Asia as a whole than the United States does. And they trade more with Asia than they do with the United States. And you and I both know that the transatlantic economic relationship was the bedrock of the global economic system for decades. But today what we're seeing is the Eurasian system really taking center stage. And indeed, the EU not only has a free trade agreement that it signed earlier this year with Japan, it wants to have a similar agreement with the ASEAN countries of Southeast Asia. It even wants to have one with India. And companies like Airbus and others are also getting into the Chinese market more heavily to substitute for their American rivals like Boeing. So the situation as it's going to unfold is that the European-Asian trade relationship is really going to strengthen. It stands at about $1.6 trillion today. That could easily grow to $2 trillion, $2.5 trillion per year, while America's trade with Europe and America's trade with Asia are probably going to stagnate or even decline.
So what you're describing is a world in Asia that is kind of moving forward, and the United States, to a certain extent, is being left behind. I mean, the most visible symbol of this is probably the U.S. opting out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
It's that, but it's also the geopolitical environment, which again is one of these areas where we can do a before and after comparison. You know, the United States is clearly no longer leading a coherent, rigid, hierarchical security order in Asia, such as we knew during the Cold War. So we have to really look at the individual relationships that Asian countries have with the U.S. one by one. Japan, of course, remains a stalwart American ally. But if you look at South Korea, for example, another very important American ally, they have been much more accommodating of Chinese interests. They're moving forward with Belt and Road Initiative, collaboration with China so that they can enhance their industrial exports. Australia, another very important American ally, has just announced that it does not want to see American missiles stationed at Darwin. So we really have to look one by one to see where American geopolitical leverage or points of influence are going to remain in the years ahead.
And do they worry, do Asian countries worry about the rise of China, or are they accommodating themselves to this new reality?
Absolutely. Look, Asian countries have been more fearful of China than anyone else, and certainly felt that long before Trump, was elected to office and launched this trade war and started to call out, if you will, China for its some of its belligerent activities. Every country in the region has a outstanding border dispute with China, or legacy tension with them, or even very recent instances of an altercation in the maritime domain like the South China Sea. So there's no question that all of China's neighbors, and China has 14 neighbors, are quite suspicious of it. But they share this geography, they share this Asian mega region, they want to find ways to accommodate their largest trading partner. And what's interesting, and I don't think gets reported enough, so I'm glad we're able to talk about it now, is that China is also learning to accommodate them. It's not just that they get bullied and they step back and they accept whatever China wants. And you can actually see China learning that it has to accommodate its neighbors if it wants to succeed at its objectives. So I still think that the Asia that we're heading towards is not one that's going to be unilaterally dominated by hegemonic China, but one in which, A, the United States should still be there playing a very important role as a security guarantor, but also one that really restores what Asian history has mostly been, Fareed, which, as you know, has been multipolar, right? You have multiple centers of power, multiple deep, rich civilizations that are quite confident in themselves, the way India is becoming, the way that Japan still is, even the Southeast Asian countries rising up and speaking for themselves. And that, I think, will be a stable Asia in the long run.
Fascinating view from Asia. Parag, always a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Fareed.
Next on GPS, tensions are rising between the U.S. and China in another way. When we come back, find out why the U.S. and China are facing off over science.
Traveling is not just about seeing places with the most likes or getting iconic photos.
Amazing.
It's about finding the city's DNA, meeting people who share its secrets. It's about making discoveries that wow you and make you feel like a child again. It's a world of wonder. Now go and see it. Wednesday on CNN, in association with Turkish Airlines.
Africa Avant-Garde, Monday on CNN.
I'm Julia Chatterley, host of CNN's First Move. I speak with newsmakers. Do you think we're still in a bull market?
We need the world to keep pace with technology.
Risk takers? What about the prospect of an IPO, or is it too soon? And the ultimate game changers. do you find valuable assets to buy?
The game changes constantly.
Make CNN your first move.
First Move with Julia Chatterley, weeknights on CNN.
I'm Oren Lieberman in Jerusalem, and this is CNN.
Connect the world with Becky Anderson.
It all starts here. Changing, fighting, creating, connecting. That's why we're here. We live here, we work here, we're from here, and we'll go wherever the story takes us. Becky Anderson in Tehran. We are in Jerusalem. Real news that shapes our world. Exploring not just what's going on, but why. I just want to press you on one further point. Getting perspective on this region from this region. Places that many of us know, but few of us get to see. Observing countries on the move, still rooted in tradition. It all starts here, and that's why we're here, bringing you the world from our Middle Eastern hub.
Connect the world with Becky Anderson, tonight on CNN.
I'm Fred Pleitgen in eastern Greenland, and this is CNN.
Now for our What in the World segment. Americans have gotten used to the idea that whatever the competition in other areas, America is the world's undisputed scientific power. Well, that is changing, and fast. China's spending on research and development has grown by an astounding 18% per year since 2000, reaching $408 billion in 2015, second only to the United States. According to a recent op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, China opened more than 1,800 universities between 2001 and 2014. According to the World Economic Forum, China has nearly 5 million recently graduated scientists as of 2016, almost 9 times the number in the United States. Last year, China surpassed the United States in the number of scientific research papers published. And China wants more. For years, it has been recruiting foreign scientists through the lucrative 1,000 Talents Placement Program. If this transformation sounds familiar, that's for a reason. Something very similar happened in the United States after World War II, and it changed the world. As the economists Jonathan Gruber and Simon Johnson write in a new book, Jump-Starting America, government funding for research and development in America increased by a factor of 20 from 1940 to 1964. The authors note that during that era, the federal government contributed funding for basic research that led to the development of microwave ovens, MRI imaging, satellites. We wouldn't have GPS or mobile internet without them. The government was also pouring money into American universities. College enrollment doubled between 1940 and 1960. During and after World War II, the US had an influx of foreign scientists fleeing Nazism and communism. But much has changed in America and the world. It used to be that no country spent a bigger proportion of national income on public research and development than the United States. Now, as Gruber and Johnson note, 9 countries do. While China's R&D spending grew by 18% per year from 2000 to 2015, in the US that figure was 4%. And spending on research and development as a percentage of the US federal budget has steadily declined over the years. At stake is winning the race to be first and best on everything from green energy to self-driving cars. But perhaps more important, at stake is the very nature of science itself. Ideally, scientific inquiry should be untampered by authoritarians or state interference. Little in China is free from either. But increasingly, the American government has also shown a willingness to interfere as well. It is reportedly cracking down on scientists who are perceived as having undisclosed ties to China. Several outlets have reported a government effort to fight back against Chinese influence at American research institutions. This drive has already led to the investigation and departure of 3 scientists from a cancer center at the University of Texas and raised fears of racial profiling from Asian American scientists all over the country. The Department of Energy recently issued a memo banning its scientists from participating in foreign recruitment programs sponsored by China and other sensitive countries, the Wall Street Journal reported. Remember that foreign collaboration has been the bedrock of American strength in science. 39% of American Nobel Prizes in science were won by the foreign-born. Scott Moore, a China scholar at the University of Pennsylvania, says that while there may be costs to openness in science, we gain more than we lose in an open exchange of ideas. Rather than trying to stop China from innovating, a much better strategy would be for the United States to massively increase funding for basic research and technology and welcome talented immigrants with open arms. The strategy, in other words, that made America #1 in the first place. Next on GPS, how do you feed almost 10 billion people on a planet much harder than it is today? Well, there are no easy answers, but we have some answers for you when we come back. How does eating bugs for brunch sound? Back in a moment.
When news happens anywhere in the world, CNN is there. In Iran,
This country continues to chafe under the weight of U.S. sanctions.
Absolutely overwhelming.
in Greenland,
The government of Greenland has come out and said, quote, Greenland is not for sale.
in Denmark,
What we got from the Prime Minister was the hope that the dialogue will continue.
in Hong Kong,
From the look of it, these protests are not about to end.
You are watching an auction of human beings. There are 12 Nigerians that were sold in front of us. We're hoping this man will agree to traffic us to Europe.
Here at CNN, we have been involved in the Freedom Project. It's our network-wide effort to end human trafficking and put an end to slavery.
It is so shocking to see these women lined up on the streets of this park. We asked Parisian police how this could be allowed to continue. She tells us what she's been through haunts her.